of Washington Historical Society meeting on Thursday, November the 19th, 1998. And the subject of our meeting tonight is the Remembrances, a meeting in honor of Louise Tompkins.
Tonight, a wonderful opportunity, and that is we're all going to reminisce about a very special person, and that is, of course, Louise Tompkins. My job is to get the ball rolling, and I'm going to do that by a couple of things. First of all, Jerry Finelli, you'll talk to him later, and he has some things he'll say, I'm sure, as we go around. But in 1992, February of 1992, we unveiled Jerry's wonderful artwork of Louise to commemorate her life.
Who's Jerry?
Mr. Finelli, sorry. Joseph, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. And we'll be talking about that wonderful work of art. And I looked up before I came to the meeting this evening in Jerry's book, in Mr. Finelli's book, the name, and in Italian it's called Coraggio Infinito. And for those of you who knew Louise, you know how apt that is. Infinite courage and great faith. Those qualities sustained her for many years, and it's those qualities that we remember in her today. We've invited three people who were very close to Louise over the years and who worked with her. Kurt Place, who appointed her as the town historian, and he has some stories he'll say about that. Edna, who worked with her for many years on her weekly column, which appeared in the newspaper, and Carmine, who met her in 1953 and ultimately succeeded her as the town of Washington historian. And if I'm here, there's one simple little connection, and that is Louise was also the parish historian for St. Peter's Church in Lithgow, and I am that historian today. So she has influenced a great many people, myself included. And with that, Kurt, Edna, would you come up here and you can start talking about it. Once they're done, then we're all going to share because we all have such wonderful memories. So if you have any Louise stories you'd like to share, once they've spoken a bit.
The program before said this was informal, so I hope
it is. It's very informal. No, that's okay. This is really a memory meeting. And I can't think of a better tribute than just being very casual and talking about all that she did to us in our association. So please. Kurt, why did you start? Because Kurt had was in the position of being the first to nominate her. Kurt?
Well, I've known Louise, I knew Louise a long time. And my father used to go over and see her in the home. And he had to write this wonderful booklet that you've probably seen in St. Peter's. And when she first had arthritis, I think she got it in 1927, she was a young girl who was just like any other young girl, swimming and hiking and this and that. And this struck her down, and she really lost her way. She just almost gave up. And her brother, Billy Tompkins, brought her to Millbrook. And they lived with a Bucco, the Donaldsons, who live on Deep Hollow Road. But she got so bad, he put her in the county home. And there she met some people by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Bates, who were missionaries. And she accepted Christ. That completely changed her life. When we went there, the first time I went there as supervisor, I left with Joe Sotero. And I'll never forget, I said, Joe, what the hell are we going to say to her? Well, you know, we didn't have to say anything. She just dominated the conversation. And She knew what I was doing, she knew what Joe was doing, she knew what this town was doing. She was alert, and she was wonderful. Well, our town clerk, Nancy Ray's, had some trouble with the history stuff. She's had so much to do. So she said, we've got to get a historian. So I said, gee, I know, I'll go with you, Louise. And I went over, and I said, Louise, I'm going to appoint you town historian. You know, she beat her little gnarled hands together, and I'll never forget, she said, well, Curtis, I can't move. Well, I said, Louise, we're not here for your body, we want your mind. and you know, when Nancy got something to do with history, she slipped it over, send it to Louise, we never heard another thing about it. And, but she was a great lady. She's one of the richest people I ever knew, not in a monetary sense, but in spiritual and courage. And she'll be long remembered. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Edna, would you pick up the story?
Can you all hear me if I remain seated?
Yes.
Thank you. Louise was a truly unique person. Those of you who knew her know that. Those of you who don't know her. Those of you who haven't known her, just take our word for it. She was closely associated with the Townshend family, but before I get into any of that, I want to read something here that are words of hers. This little brochure she had printed on the occasion of her golden anniversary with arthritis. Maybe I'd better stand up. And I'll leave it up here for you to look at. I'm not going to read it all, but I just want to give a background. She said that this, on the Youth Crusade broadcast over WKIP at Poughkeepsie on October 1941, I told of my happy early teenage years and how it seemed that the spirit got in on me at the age of 19. I loved the outdoor life, hiking, swimming, especially in Lake George, New York, and horseback riding. Other favorites in sports were tennis, basketball, and sandlot baseball. It was quite natural then that upon graduation from high school, I decided to enter the School for Physical Education and Allied Health Professions at Cambridge, Massachusetts. Some of you may remember that was the Sergeant School of Physical Education. To prepare for my life work in one of these fields, I loved the studies and the athletics in which I participated there. I can never forget the marching and drilling in Fenway Park, Boston, nor the exciting demonstrations in the Boston Arena. During the end of my second year at school, I felt something like a grain of sand in my left hip. At the end of June 1927, cramps and pain hit my legs like bolts of lightning. I struggled to my home in Manchester, Connecticut, and from there I entered a hospital in Hartford for treatment. My faith was in the doctors. They can cure me, I said. There was no relief, however, although I said it would have to be a kill or cure. During the 22 months that I remained at the hospital, I went through the shattering experience of 12 trips to the operating room. Every time I came out of the anesthetic, I would say, "What is life? What is it all about?" The doctors did all they could for me, but to no avail. Their diagnosis was that I had a severe case of a strange type of incurable arthritis. They sent me to the Home for Crippled Children at Newington, Connecticut, to exercise in the second heated therapeutic pool built in this country. I stayed in the pool, but I became stiffer and stiffer as my joints fused together. I had to leave the home because I was overage and incurable. Finally, my brother came to the rescue and took me to his home near Millbrook. I grew rapidly worse, and my brother took me to a nursing home at Millbrook. That nursing home is the building next to the Federated Church, the stone building, and it was run by Nellie Vincent. Some of you may remember Nellie Vincent. She was Tom Vincent Sr.'s sister, and she and another woman ran it as a nursing home. My joints continued to fuse, and still my spirit seemed locked in a living coffin. I was hopelessly confused, afraid to live, and more afraid to die. I had believed the theories of evolution and psychology which I had been taught, but they were of no help to me now. Worse than that, they blocked off from me the way the only one could help me, the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and now, praise God, my Savior. I'm just going to read one more part of a paragraph here, and then I'll skip because there's a great deal of testimony in this. 2 missionaries visited me and told me that Jesus never fails. He could help me. They read from the Bible. I felt I had known all about the Lord Jesus Christ before. I'd always gone to church and Sunday school, but until then I did not know him as my personal Savior. The missionaries prayed for me and told me to ask the Lord Jesus into my heart and to forgive my sins and take over the running of my life. I did that. They also gave me a Bible and told me prayerfully to read it every day. Due to lack of funds, I could not remain in the nursing home. I was taken to the Dutchess County Infirmary at Millbrook. This has been my home over the past 38 years. This was written in 1977. And I thank God for the capable assistance and loving care bestowed on me during all of this time. I still experience severe jolting pain. I know if I resorted to painkillers, I would lose my tool, my last tool, my mind. It would become dull, and I struggled against that. By this time, I was a total cripple, unable even to feed myself. I had joined the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church, and now, in my misery, I appealed to the elders to hold a healing service for me. They came to me, anointed me with oil, and fasted and prayed for me for 4 hours. From that time on, the terrible arthritic pain gradually left me. I can't thank God enough for this blessing. That was 37 years ago. I had not used my hands in 7 years. Now I began to knit, write, and feed myself with a long-handled spoon. Kurt, do you remember seeing that spoon? The handle about this long. I knitted an afghan for a missionary friend. 2 former schoolmates and another friend saw a picture of the afghan in the newspaper, and they graciously gave me $50. I began a correspondence course in journalism. The Lord provided the extra funds, and I completed the course in 1 year. An opportunity came to write a column on local history for the Millbrook newspaper. That was 28 years ago, and with God's enablement, I am still writing it. I'm an honorary member of the Dutchess County Historical Society, historian of the town in which I live, and also a member of the Millbrook Historical Society. On a stretcher, I sometimes attend church services where the privilege is usually given to speak a few words of testimony. I also attend picnics and go for rides. Just this is available if you want it afterwards. My husband, John Tilsley, was in high school with Louise, and I'm not really sure, so I can't say this for a fact, that he encouraged her to take the correspondence course. But when she completed the correspondence course, he offered her a job writing for the Millbrook Round Table. Of course, she was bedridden at the time, as you can see. But they rigged up some kind of a big wooden table to fit over her bed, and he would take the newspaper files. A certain number of newspapers were put in these metal contraptions that would be all kept together. He would take the files down to her, and she would peruse them And her first column was called, I think, 50 years ago. And she would excerpt items from the paper that she thought would be interesting for the readers. And then as time went on, the titles of her columns changed. John used to, well, one story that she loved to tell is the fact that one day something happened to the table and the file fell off on the floor and all the papers came out scattered skelter. And he had to be called, and she was so afraid she was going to lose her job. She felt quite important because she was earning a little money besides doing this wonderful work. But anyway, she took it very easily, and she didn't lose her job. And then I began to visit her, and we became very good friends. She proofreader of the paper at the time, so we worked hand in glove. As time went on, she was just an incorrigible person, and you said she was fearless about corresponding with anybody. She wrote to congressmen, she wrote to the president, she had a citation from the astronauts because she had written them such a nice letter, and fortunately she had a single room, and that room she had decorated as her own bailiwick. Oh yes, she had a helper, yes, I mustn't forget to say that she of course needed a lot of help in shifting things around. And there was another patient at the infirmary whose name was Hilda Bauer, and they were very good friends. The only, Louise said the thing that she failed in, she never was able to convert Hilda.
Well, one thing I'm sure, when you went to see Louise, and you went in her room with an awful lot of problems in your mind, I'll tell you, when you came out, they didn't seem to be quite that big. She's an amazing lady.
That's so true. John used to say if he was down at all and he'd take the papers to Louise, he felt like a different person when he left her room. And she just never complained. And there, almost anybody else would have been crushed beyond doing anything. But she had a fine mind, and she was highly motivated, and she decided that she was going to do something about this. So she, like you say, she got all the bits of people that moves around here, and she was a tireless researcher.
She certainly was. But you just think, could you lie in a bed, your body like stone, not moving? Just think of it. For those years.
She was at the infirmary over 50 years.
No, I know that she had a pipeline up there. She had to. You go crazy.
And she had a mirror. And I read that she also had a mirror up above that she could see both angles.
Yeah. She was a great lady. She certainly was. And I was privileged to know her.
Many years ago, when the Historical Society was a smaller group than this, she was a member of that, and to honor her, we used to have one meeting a year at the county infirmary, and she was the shining star of that meeting. It was her hope always to publish a book containing the columns or other things that she had written. And we put the proposition to the society at that time, and it seemed beyond the means of the group to do this. So she and I hit on the idea of taping her columns, and that we did. And I worked with her for 3 years, taping columns, which she chose the one she wanted to tape. I'll read them off to you because these are, I would take after we finished taping one, Peter Fiore, who was the son of Tom Fiore, who was the superintendent of the infirmary at that time, would duplicate them. So we had the original copy, which we deposited in the we still have a strong box at the library. Well, the original copies are supposed to be in there, and the retaped copy I would give to the librarian for circulation. Now somehow, that was before the days of the library was really a multimedia center, and I don't think, maybe there was another nuisance, I don't know, but some of them I think have gotten lost, much of our distress, some of the wonderful ones, and I don't know now what has happened to them, or if they are still there for circulation. But I hope the ones that are the originals are still in the box.
Are they on cassettes?
Pardon?
Are they on cassettes? Is it the tapes?
The regular tape. They weren't really very good because we didn't have a really good tape recorder. And there were times when her voice when she wasn't in good voice. But nevertheless, they were a record of life as she knew it growing up, which she felt was so important for the coming generation. She was so interested in children always. These are the tapes that are there that we did. Millbrook the Beautiful, The Great Fire, Italian Contribution, New Year's Day, Quaker Meeting House, Public Travel, The Depression, Horses of Dutchess County, Shoemaker Gus O'Reilly. Anybody remember Gus O'Reilly? Lincoln's Birthday, Valentine's Day, Perils of the Chickens, Hatching Chickens, Berry Picking and Making Hay, Getting Charcoal, Monsignor John Simmons, The Blizzard of '88, Happy Childhood Days, The Farm, Jackie the Pony. Jackie was her favorite pony. Winter Days in the Country School, The Pot-Bellied Stove, Taking Milk to the Factory, Ice Harvesting, and Tree Harvesting. So, although we tried to meet every week to do this, we didn't always accomplish what we planned each time. So it did take a long period of time to do these. So if any of you are interested, you can inquire at the library and see if they're available. If they're not, some could still be redone from the original.
We should really try to do
We'll
something.
check on that. That's a good project. Follow up on it.
Louise arrived at the infirmary in 1939, and she retired she survived all the changes in the ownership of the Round Table, and her retirement came in 1985 with the reserves. She was born in 1907 in August, and died in August 1991 at age 84. She's buried in St. Peter's because there was a family plot there.
No, it wasn't a family. I'll see what happened. He died in Charlotte.
Excuse me, I don't mean.
Historians always find.
She was speak louder.
She's in she's buried in the Cutler plot. What part? The Cutler Hale was for her grandparents. And she asked me if she could be buried there. Well, I said, Louise, all I need is a letter from the Cutler to the Hale saying, that's fine. But she got the letter, so she's buried there and so's Hilda. Because I told her we needed the letter. Some family with a Hale came in, some young people said, well, they have no right to be here. So that's the reason that I insisted on a letter, and I got it, and there's no problem. And there she is.
I had the very nice honor and a very difficult task of being asked to speak at her funeral service. It was a hard thing to do, as much as we were very close friends, but anyway, I did it. I brought with me tonight a folder with a group of her columns from 1981, 1982. And if anyone wants to see any of these later on, I'll leave them out for you to see. I also brought another picture of her when she won, she received a plaque and a check for $250 from Taconic Press Manager Editor Harvey Osler of the Dutchess County Infirmary. She is, this was for an Exxon Writing Award, and that pleased her very much. She always portioned out her earnings in a very interesting way. Most of them, of course, given away.
Well, she was honored by the county, too, because I went in with her that day.
By the,
By
yes,
the county board of representatives.
Could you talk a little bit louder?
What?
Could you talk a little bit
You can speak
louder?
to us.
Yeah.
She was honored by the county board of representatives, because I went in with her that day. And, so that pleased her a great deal.
So Kurt, how did they transport her? She was on a stretcher? Or?
Yeah, well, they had a station wagon or whatever, and they put it right in the station wagon. And, she did, she drove a little, she got around a little bit. They put her in the station wagon, take her here and there, but it's quite a trick to do it, You just couldn't throw her in like you do a toothpick. You had to be very careful.
well, listen, strangely enough, she wasn't outdoors at all, and yet she had great trouble with skin cancer, and she often had to go into Tipsy Reductive Vassar Hospital to have them, go through moves, so they used the stretcher then. And she had a cousin, I don't know, was it Pine Plains or maybe that, and she used to go there for picnics in the summer occasionally. So she did get around. And I must mention that she kept current of everything that happened. She was taken into the, I guess it was sort of, the TV room, I guess, in the common room, very early morning to the first news program in the morning, and she'd be in there by herself, and she would get the news of the day, and so she wasn't disturbed by any conversation around. And I spent a lot of time with her at the end of her life, and it was only, maybe about a week or 10 days before she died, and she insisted on every day that I saw her telling her what was going on in the world. She never lost her interest in things and people.
And she never failed to vote by absentee ballot.
Oh, that's right. And another thing, Kurt, she never complained.
Never complained.
And so much to anybody else would have, I'm sure, been covered with complaints, but she was a wonderful person. Right?
Oh, she
Sally, yeah.
Where's that most of mine from?
Sally went there once a day and gave her a new joke every day.
I must look like a, I guess I look like a terribly straight-laced person because she never told me any, but my daughter was visiting her one Christmas vacation, and she came home and she said, Mommy, Louise told me this story, but she said she would never tell you.
Do you remember those jokes, Sally?
They're so sweet. Carmine, why don't you talk about your recollections and your experiences?
After all that has been said, what more can I say? I met Louise in 1953 at the infirmary. I had come up to teach at the old Greer School from Columbia University, and the director of the school at Greer took me there to see her, to meet her. He had told me so much about Louise before we went, how she was helpless because she had been paralyzed, and I had read some of her columns in the paper, and when I met her, I was amazed at how joyful she was, and ever since then, I went several more times, and many other people. It was a general comment by everybody that if you went to visit Louise, she cheered you up. You didn't have to give her the good word, she gave it to you. Now, Louise was born, as we already heard, in 1907. Her mother died when she was only 2.5 years old. And she eventually went to live with her grandparents down Deep Hollow Road. and Hale was my name, the grandparents' name. And eventually, she went to the school, local school in Lithgow, and when she was about 20 years old, and she was stricken with this malady, and she was paralyzed. But before that, she had gone to Massachusetts, as has already been said, and there she had become a physical education person. Paid for her stay there.
Mrs. Montague.
Montague,
Mrs.
right.
Montague to pay.
Helped pay for her stay at the infirmary. Eventually, she was moved to the county infirmary. I believe it was in 1939 or thereabouts. And she was there until the day she died. That's where I met her. She was a wonderful person, and she had many, many good qualities. My problem was when I arrived there that I had majored and specialized in ancient and medieval history. And now here I was when I had translated a Greek papyrus, by the way, at Columbia, from close to the beginning of the BC of the Christian era. And here I was in this local affair, trying to get interested in local history. Can you imagine when you have talked about a date in 4200 BC, and you come here and people say that one generation ago was ancient? It was difficult for me to get used to it. At any rate, I kept reading her columns, and in 1975, I was a member of the Historical Society at that time, and they were trying to write a book, a history of Millbrook and the town of Washington. And the man who was in charge of it quit. He went away. So they asked me would I do it. It was not easy. From ancient history, medieval history, and all of that to come down to 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and so on. But at any rate, I wrote that first book in 1975. And it was not very much. But in 1988, we did the second edition, which is the one which is available. You can still buy it, fully illustrated, and so on. And I dedicated that one to Louise Tompkins. What a wonderful person she was. I saw her many, many times and talked to her about history, about local history. She was a wonderful person. You went to see Louise, she cheered you up. You didn't have to cheer her up at all. A tremendous person, without any question whatsoever. She got me interested in so many local things that I probably would have never been interested in without her. Now, what can I say? I was told that we were only to say a few words, not very much, not very long. Maybe someday someone will write a book about Louise. It's certainly worth doing. The material is not easy. She had a difficult time with the history, by the way, because she could not go to the library herself. She could not do research herself. She was so helpless. When I first met her, she had a pencil strapped to her hand, a paper under both hands, and she would scribble very slowly with that pencil, and with the other hand pull the paper very slowly. She was helpless physically, but she was brilliant mentally. She could talk, she remembered, she grasped things, but she had that problem. People brought information to her, they brought material to her, and it wasn't always accurate. But regardless of that, in spite of that, the history that she wrote was 90% accurate. She was a good writer of history, that I can guarantee, having been trained myself as a historian. Now, what more can I say about such a person? She was terrific. I have some notes that I made, but so much has already been said, I think it would be perhaps boring. She began writing a column, I believe, in 1948 in the paper. It was first she called the Gay 90s, and then Out of the Past in Old Dutchess. That's what it was called when I began to read it, when I got here. She was appointed town historian by the gentleman here. And eventually, when she retired, they appointed me to succeed her as historian of the town. I had a wonderful time working with her the few times that I met and talked with her. I never walked away dissatisfied, never walked away without having been, built up by what she would say and what she would do. She was flat on her back, unable to use her hands. She wrote with a pen, as I say, strapped to her palm, and pulled the paper with the other. I watched her do it. Never had it easy. She had a rough life, and she was a person that delivered joy to whoever met her and talked with her, and produced a wonderful history of the area. She deserves all the credit that people can give her. All the credit. I don't know what more I can say. She was one of the most interesting, one of the most fabulous persons I ever met.
Well, just one more quick word I have is that when she was the town historian, every January I used to get this 2-page report from her. And I know, she wrote it out, and it was real effort. So I never filed it away before it was formally read to the board. I don't prepare a reader. But it was quite a work of hers to do that. So I just passed that on.
When all her copy came into the newspaper in longhand, someone would put the pen in between these two fingers, and she wrote very legible longhand. One thing I meant to tell you, when she was at Newington Children's Hospital in Connecticut, President Roosevelt came to call, and she said he was such an inspiration to see him in his state, and she was really very impressed by that. However, I think she always voted Republican.
By the way, when I first came to this area, the first historian I met was that lady there at the end of the first line. And she made a statement at one time that I've never forgotten. She said that she had been invited to go to Poughkeepsie to some historical meeting. And she said that she let them know that she never left Milton. Remember that?
Now, we have a lot of memories I know we want to share, and we're going to be doing that. But what I'd like to do is, before we open it up generally, Joseph Finelli is here. And in November of 1992, when we unveiled this work, we were very honored that he had accepted the commission. And as many of you know, he's our resident sculptor, and yet most of his pieces end up leaving the country. So we're very fortunate that we have not only Louise remembered, but that Joseph's sculpture is here for all of us to enjoy. And Joseph, thank you so much. Stand up. Stand up.
I would like to say a couple of words too. I mean, after all, you don't do a piece of work unless you know the person, unless you have a feeling. When I moved up here in 1960, shortly after I started to read, a little bit carried away, our columns. And it always got me to say, how can this woman do all of this laying down? How could she be so informed? But I never forgotten it. But then again, if you become a friend of Carmine Campino, there's a lot of things that don't forget either, because he's going to tell you. I did not get a $10,000 commission, which is really worth a lot more than that. All I was asked to by Carmine to say, we have to do something in order so people never forget to this. And for that alone, naturally, I got a few things together, and I was able to portray her, considering, what she looked like, what she'd done. It wasn't really that easy, but then again, if you have love, you manage. And I'm very happy that I did something for a little town here, hoping for Louise's sake. Okay.
I call that man a chiseler. Before you leave, take a look from close by and look at the hands, the way they are banged and arms. He textured that beautifully.
All the fingers were like this.
Sure.
Mrs. Tompkins, can I say something?
Kurt, there was one thing we forgot. She said it was the high point of her life when she was chosen master or mistress of ceremonies at the Centennial Parade of Poughkeepsie.
Right.
That was a great thing for her. That's so important.
I've known Louise ever since I was a little girl. In fact, my father taught her to ride on that pony. He used to work on the farm with the hay and we always visited her when she was over here at the infirmary or the church. Little did I know then that I would be taking care of Louise. I took care of her from 1972 to 1982. And it really broke your heart. And you had to handle her just like a little child of God. Her hands. And when you would take her from her bed to put her in the wheelchair that she had, it was dangerous. Afraid that you would touch her just right or something and break a bone. And when you go to get her back out of that was more tedious too, because you had to raise her up, and there would be two of us working. I generally had the top of her, and the other girl had her feet. But when you went to bring her up like that toward you had to watch those fingers, because they were so brittle. And one time we had a new girl, and she didn't understand just what I said to her about the bottom part of her, how to raise under her legs. And when she brought her up quick. And that little finger came up in the chest, quick. And I just about fainted because I thought I had hurt her. But she says, no, I'm all right. She says, I'm stronger than you think. And same way with feeding. We all had to use straws. And this long-handled spoon, which we spoke about, was really one of the most important things that we had to watch out and take care of for her. And every time that any of us were going a little depressed about something, she would say, no, just one say a little prayer. She was just great. And she said she was a red-hot Republican. You could stand there and you could, as I am a Republican too, and this another girl was a Democrat. Well, boy, we really had a hot and heavy one day. The rest of the kids stood out there in the hall. What's going on in there? What's going on in there? But she was just wonderful, and all of the missionaries around here would come in to see her. And I know Mrs. Tilsley was reading about a couple of the missionaries. That was Mr. and Mrs. Starr, who used to be down at Thorn Crest. And they always come in and seen her and brought her books and things like that. But she was the greatest. And the last time I went down to see her, she said, Martina, please feed me. I couldn't, it says, please, I can't, I says, I'm not working here. As anything should happen, I'm not covered. I says, I can't do it. And I went out, I says, I may be bad. I went out and I broke and cried because I couldn't do it. And she wanted me to do so bad.
But you did it so many other times.
So many other times.
Doris, you had something you...
Hi, I'm Doris Simonson Washburn from Town Grange. And I saw Louise Tompkins for the first time when I was in Girl Scouts.
You did it
11
together.
years old.
Yeah.
Went down there with my friend Joan Dean Vachon, you know, Dean's store. And Joan said we had to go down to the infirmary for something. And I don't remember if I was with a group of the scouts or just with Joan. And we went into the infirmary and the door was open to her room about this far. And she told me, that's Louise Tompkins in there. And she's crippled up with arthritis. And I peeked in and I could see her. Probably I remember maybe laying in bed with the hands like that. And that made quite an impression on an 11-year-old girl. And then my second remembrance of Louise comes in the 1980s, when 1980 to 1985, I'm not sure which of the year, but I was involved with typing the Dutchess County Historical Society's yearbook, and for those 5 years. So in one of those 5 yearbooks is an article written by Louise, and I can't recall exactly what it was about. I think it was about growing up on a farm. The editor of the yearbook was Bill McDermott from Clinton Corners. He's Clinton, town of Clinton historian. And he was the editor, and he and I worked together because he gave me the articles and I typed them for publication, yearbook. And so one time when he was at my house, we were working on a yearbook that year. Like I said, either 1980, 81, 82, 83, 45, I don't remember which. And he gives me the articles to type to prepare for publication. And he gives me these 4 or 5 pages, handwriting. Handwriting. And he says, make a guess, he says. How old do you think the person was that wrote this? How old do you think the person is that wrote this? And I looked at the writing, and it was very legible, longhand, and I said, well, I would make a guess that the person's either 8 or 80. And he says, you're almost right. It was Louise Tompkins. And I think probably, from my figuring, she was around 75. And he told me it was Louise. And I knew about her history, physical history, so I guess I made a good guess. And it was very legible, easy to write, to read. So that's one of my second impression of Louise Tompkins. And then the other one was when I saw her in the 1976 centennial. So I just wanted to say.
And just her love of history, at her parting, the trophies and certificates and documents that she received, she gave to the Dutchess County Historical Society so that they would always be saved for future generations. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that Edna had said that once a year we would go down to the infirmary for a Town of Washington Historical Society meeting. When I was the program chairman, I thought, this is a shame. Louise is our town historian, and she can't come to our meetings. So why don't we bring all of our meetings down there? So I phoned Tom Fiore, who was the manager of the infirmary at the time, and I asked him, and he was delighted. And so I would phone like 2 days or so before our meeting and remind Tom. And so we'd get there, and they would bring Louise down on that litter that she rode on. And she would be so happy. And when you went like this, Kurt, when she would walk in, she'd be going like this, because she'd be so happy we would be there. And she always added, no matter who spoke, she always added to the meeting. And I think we did that for about 2 years until, Charlie Tripp had been our president, and then he retired. And then there was a period of time where the society just sort of drifted. So we did not, go down. Really, the society almost became obsolete there for several years. So we didn't go down, of course. But it was a joy to be there. And sometimes I would go down to see her in between. And as you say, you go in maybe feeling a little bit sorry for yourself, or maybe you weren't feeling that great that day, and you come out, and you just felt so lifted. She was just an amazing, amazing person.
Yes.
I know she always liked music, because I was a Girl Scout leader for 5 or 6 years, and during the holidays, like Christmas time, they always wanted us to come down and sing. And she was one of those people, she tried to sing what we were singing, all the same. But I noticed, we remember having her come to the Federated Church, and she always wanted to do what the minister, listen to the minister and hear him sing some of the songs for the congregation. So she really loved her music. She looked forward to the holidays to be able to hear those kids.
Scott, I have a
Hi, Dean, very much out of order, but I didn't have a chance to mention this before you turned the meeting over to David. I have a suggestion for the back burner that ties right in with what you were saying, David, about gifts being given, and then with things to Louise. Because some time ago, I approached the then supervisor about using the top floor of this building for a museum, a county, I don't mean county, a township, Milwaukee Township Museum. And it was prompted by the time that Beverly Davidson was breaking up things and gave all his wonderful old farm equipment to carry Arboretum, which is probably a good place for it. But if there was a place for it here, I'm sure he would have given it here. And the longer we wait on these things, the scarcer the things become, the old things. And I don't have the energy now to do the work I could have done then on it, but I'd be willing to work on something like that if it ever meets the approval of the board.
By the way, what became of all that equipment at the Arboretum?
It's in the
They still have it.
No.
Not bad, but I mean.
I can give the update on that. It's at the Dutchess County Historical Society at the Clinton House. Because the Arboretum had to expand their educational needs, and they didn't have the room. So that's where it is now, at the Clinton House.
What is going to happen to the infirmary buildings? There's an empty building for a museum.
Too big.
Historical, and part of it, no, I was thinking of the older building.
Oh, I see, okay.
The historic building. Gee, gotta start thinking about that. But could I say something more about those columns? Here's one of this Christmas time inserts, and I cut up the column, waiting for Santa on the farm, and fixed this up for my granddaughter at Christmas 1977, and she was going to school to you, and and put in pictures and had the column in there. And why aren't there books made of those columns? And here you could make several Christmas books just on those Christmas columns for children.
Well, thank you. I think that there's a lot of good suggestions that were made this evening, and hopefully this will create a catalyst to focus at the treasure that we all know is Louise, and the possibility of pulling together something. So stay tuned. Perhaps next year at this meeting, we will be able to unveil some of the resources that were prompted from this discussion.
Well, Ted, this third floor, is there space there to do, not anymore?
So it's being used for a number of things.
We all have the difficulty of not having enough room.
Well, I think you've got to put an elevator in the public building, you know, public use and all that.
Hi. When Louise was still in the infirmary and still quite alert, I mean, not that she ever got to the point that she wasn't alert, but when she was still writing her columns, I remember that, you know, she always did want them to go into like a book form. And I'm trying to think of the name of the teacher at Millbrook High School. She taught 7th or 8th grade, Miss Paytay. And she started it as a class project. And then her parents both got sick. And she had to, they were going in the hospital, nursing homes. And I don't know whatever happened. I remember Miss Paytay telling me after both parents had died that she wanted to get back to completing that because Louise, you know, she had promised Louise she would, but I don't think it ever happened. I think shortly after that she herself
Someone
retired.
should do a book about Louise.
No, and put these
Tremendous job,
columns
a lot of work.
Are those articles all still available in the library?
They're all on microfiche. We have, Scott and I have some homework to do with the files, but everything's available on microfiche.
Well,
So-
even if we reproduce that little book that Mrs. Tilsley has, that little pamphlet about Louise.
Yeah, well, we'll do that as an executive committee and sort out. So why don't we think of this as chapter 1, and same place next year, our November meeting, we'll have chapter 2. and the story will continue, and hopefully we'll have some good news and an update. Thank you all for coming.
If anybody, excuse me, if anybody